I'm Dave.
I'm Sean.
This is Barstools
And Bandtalk. The complete, and actually we're getting ready to say the complete music bucket list.
I said we're the complete list. We're the complete list for everything. Anything you want, we're it.
We got a neat one tonight. And this is an angle that I can't believe it took me this long to think about it. We've got a ton of drummers on this show. And in our backyard, there is a world-renowned cymbal maker. I use these cymbals myself. A lot of the people that are on the show that are drummers would use these cymbals. And they're made in a little place called Meductic, which is about 45 minutes outside of Fredericton. Town of about 1,200 people. The whole town literally works at this plant. And Sabian Cymbals, when I say world-renowned, they're world-renowned. Everybody from, I won't even name names. We'll talk to our guests about that, but I use them, and they're awesome. So again, I'm excited about this. Without further ado, we're going to introduce Mr. Andy Zildjian from Sabian Cymbals.
I didn't get to say anything. I'm just excited.
You don't need.
Anyhow, I like drums.
Yeah.
I like Andy. He's a good guy. Ooh. And there he is in living color.
Hey, fellas.
So we're just doing the little intro there, and a lot of people that are drummers obviously know the story and know the Sabian story, but there's an awful lot of people that, and I don't know if it's our maritime culture, but we can't believe something so big can be made in our own backyard.
Why not?
We were with the town of Meductic, and we were basically talking about the fact that, you guys you make a world-renowned product in a small, basically little village in New Brunswick.
Yep, sure do. And, the story, do you want to hear the whole story?
You know what? I wouldn't mind hearing the whole story because I'm a bass player. I'm not a drummer. But there's other folks on here who are fans, who are musicians, who are artists, who are just like the page. And they'd love to hear that story. I'm sure they would. From a gentleman by the name of Zildjian.
Well, it all started back in 1946. My dad had just come back from the Second World War. And he had friends who were living down, he was born and raised in Boston. And he had friends who were down there who said, come on, Bob, let's go hunting and fishing. And so they brought him up here to Meductic, the little place up here, and a friend of his, Willard Way, out in the woods. And he started fishing up here and hunting up here, and he started to really like it. Met the people and thought, hey, people are kind of cool. I like it here. And so he just kept coming back year after year after year. And there was a lot of farmers up here. And when you're a farmer, you really have to live on your own ingenuity. And you also have to, you either live and do what you need to do, or you don't, you die, or you go broke. And so there was a definite determination. There was a strength of character in all the people that he met. And he thought, this is a great place. 1968, there was a tariff on cymbals being shipped over to Europe. So it was more expensive to ship from the US than it was from a Commonwealth country, Canada. And he said, why don't we set up a plant up there, because we've got we've got a competitor, so we need something to compete against them, and we need to be able to ship to Europe for less. So he picked Meductic because knew the people, he knew the integrity, he knew the work ethic and the ingenuity, and figured this is the right spot. And so he picked a spot up here. They were putting in a dam at that point, and there's a 40-mile lake. And there was a farm that a friend of his friends owned, that most of it was going to be covered by the river. And the guy got so ticked off that he just said, that's it, I'm out of here, I'm selling my farm. And the old man said, I'll bet. And so there's 40 acres right here. And he got it for a pretty good price because that guy was just so ticked off. And then he built a factory. But in building the factory, his father, who was the chairman and president of the whole Zildjian company at that point, had said, started off with, Bob, we need to build this, go ahead and do it. And then as it was things were being delivered by the railroad, all the factory parts and all that stuff, he said, what are we doing this for? We don't need to do this. And my dad said, which is so typical of his grandfather. So what he did was he said, look, I'll pay for it. I'll put it up and we're going to need it. But and it's the only time he ever did this. You need to sign a document that says, if I want to, I can buy this for the price of construction at any time I want. And it's the only time he had my grandfather sign something. And so he did. And anyway, built the factory, started making what were at that point called Asco cymbals. And, or that was Asco factory, we were building Zilco cymbals, which was the second line. And then as, you know, the Beatles were growing and rock and roll music was growing and there were more and more cymbals on drum sets, there became more demand. And so the factory that was down in Boston area couldn't keep up. So we said up here, why don't we make all the stuff that's going to be difficult to make, and you guys just make the stuff that goes and goes and goes and goes. And so that's what they did. They just made all the easy stuff that was just selling and selling and selling. And up here, we had people learning how to make really difficult cymbals. And so when my grandfather died, and he was the referee between my uncle and my dad, when he died, there was a little bit of turmoil. And then we decided, instead of staying together, we really needed to blow it apart. And we took out the contract, $100,000. We had the whole factory and everything in it. Pretty amazing. Anyway,
Wow.
Started Sabian, and we had the people who could make all those hard to make cymbals. The extra thins, the Chinese cymbals, the swish pangs, all those types of things that just weren't run of the mill. And so when it came time to just make a regular hi-hat, heck, that's easy. I mean, you know, if you know how to skate well enough to be an NHL skater, you can skate across a pond, right? That's how easy it was. So anyway, after a while, you know, we were making a good reputation with that. I actually have to take you back to 76 for a second. Sorry about that. There was another piece of the family, a distant relative, who owned what was called the K. Zildjian factory over in Istanbul. And my grandfather had left Istanbul during the, it was the second time the Turks tried to kill all the Armenians. And he said, I'm out of here. So he left and went to America. But this part of the family stayed. They had a factory there. My dad went over and talked to them, and he bought it. And in doing so, the family members that had been working at the factory, one of them came over to teach everybody how to hand hammer, and they went to the United States. They went to the factory in Boston. But because my grandfather was very much, didn't want to hear about red tape, didn't want to, you know, rules and regulations, they're not for me. He forgot to do this thing called immigration. And so, yeah, when this guy had been there for about a month, the immigration came in and said, hello, Mr. Zildjian, we understand that you have somebody working here by the name of Michael Zildjian. He goes, yes, very good boy, works very hard. He goes, yeah. Is he an immigrant? Is he just said, don't worry, he never go on the door. Good working boy, always be good. Don't worry, he's fine. And they said, well, that may be so, but if he's never registered as a citizen and he's working here right now, or a green card, he's got 24 hours to get out of the country. So, right. And we said, we got a factory. So we brought him up here and did all the paperwork correctly. And he taught everybody up here how to hand hammer cymbals. When we left in 1981, we had not only the people who could make the difficult stuff, the only people who knew how to hand hammer cymbals. So really our hallmark to everything was by making the HH, the hand hammered cymbal. That was the one thing that we had that nobody else could come near. And and then, you know, we just kept growing. We wanted to learn more. That was the cool part about having people who are really ingenious and lived on their own ingenuity. It wasn't just doing it by rote. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to learn more. And like we had this guy, Nord Hargrove, every time we get a machine in, he'd take it on the weekend, he'd tear it apart and he'd put it back together again. So he knew exactly how it worked. And that's the kind of mindset. He wanted to know how the thing worked so that he knew what it did and how it could affect the cymbal. And that fearlessness, that mindset, that innovation, ingenuity was just, and it still is just part of our culture. We got a guy over there right now who's just learning how to take over in the vault, which is where we keep all of our cymbals, the inventory. And he's been tearing apart printing machines and trademark machines just to learn how to do it. And it's like, awesome. He's on the same path. He's doing great. So anyway, that's how we started. But the idea of just innovating and always looking for, asking artists, what are you looking for? What's different that you don't have? And instead of saying, this is what we have, this is what you get, it was, what do you want? Yeah, I think we can do that. Is this it? And that we changed that mindset around. it had always been artist relations it was an important part of what Zildjian did, and it still is how they handle things. The artists come in, they give them what they've got and say, this is the sound you were looking for. And for the most part, it's like, yeah, that's close enough. Whereas we won't take close enough. We've had people come up and they've been here for 3 weeks working on trying to get a cymbal. Now I've had people who have come from, let's just say the other company, and have said they've been working on something for 3 years and haven't had it. And I said, I was laughing at one of these guys and I said, dude, we're going to have that in 3 weeks. And we had it in a week and a half. And it blew his mind. It's like, well, if you do it by hand, and if you know why things happen the way they do and why sound comes out the way it does, you can do anything. So anyway, in a quick nutshell, that's our story.
Well, you know what? And it clears up an awful lot because I've heard so many versions of that story.
Believe them all, they're fun.
Horse's mouth, right? So it's awesome. So who was your I guess your first endorsee way back when you guys finally put the Sabian stamp on it?
Wow, our first endorsee. Geez, you know what? I'm not exactly sure because I wasn't working here at that point. I was still in high school.
Yeah.
And I think it was Keith, and I've forgotten his last name now, but he was an educator down in New York who was traveled up to Montreal because he knew that we were making hand-hammered cymbals and he knew he couldn't get them in the United States. And he was a friend with a fella named Vic Firth, who was a great friend of my dad's. And Vic had said to him, Keith, you got to go up to Montreal or to Toronto. Go to Toronto and talk to this fellow, Roy Edmonds. And he did. And as soon as he heard the hand-hammered stuff, this is the one I've been looking for. Try them all out. This is the one I've been dying to have this one. And he was the first one. So we started off with an educator. He was an educator, I think it was at the Boston Conservatory. And that was our first endorser. And from there, he started telling everybody else. So we had jazz guys out just crazy going nuts for it because they would come up to Canada because in 1981, in December is when we actually started the company. 1982, we could sell everywhere except for the United States. And then in 83, we could sell in the United States. And so we were picking up endorsers over in Europe. We were getting them in Asia. But as far as it goes with people around here, Canadians were flocking in because it was a sound that they were used to. Matter of fact, somebody like Neil Peart, the reason why he came over to play Sabian was because he was playing K Zildjian, which was made up here. So he was looking for the Canadian K. And when he heard that this is where it was, he was right in. But all these folks, all these guys, specifically from New York, in Boston, we're going up to Toronto, trying out stuff and finding exactly what they wanted and becoming what we called at that point the Sabian switchers.
Let me ask a question if you don't mind, because I'm the bass player here in the room. So I'd like to be educated. What are the natural, what elements are these cymbals made from? And can you get them in New Brunswick or does it have to be shipped in? I don't know. What material are the cymbals made from?
Well, it's the cymbals that we make were originally started back in the Bronze Age. So it's bronze. It's copper and tin. But there are a lot of different types of bronze. I mean, you have what we call B8, which is 92% copper, 8% tin. And it's somewhat easier to work with. It's not quite as temperamental, but it doesn't give you as good a sound. So that's our lower end line. It's our student line. European cymbals are made out of that, and they seem to really, they like what they do, but God bless them. They don't know how to do the B20 because if you're taking the B20 and you're melting that together, which is 80% copper, 20% tin, you melt it down, you pour it into a casting. The casting cools, you weigh it out, you know what you're going to be using that casting for. Then you put it in an oven and you heat the oven up. It's 1600 degrees. And from there, you roll it through rollers once, heat it up again, twice, heat it up again, anywhere up to about a dozen times, usually 9, but up to a dozen times depending on what you're making. Now, you're putting a 1600 degree piece of metal through pressure. So it's hot, it's pressurized, and we have to put water on the rollers so that the rollers don't heat up and expand and crush it even more. So now you're talking about heat, pressure, and water. So you have a steam explosion built right there. But because of the family process, we know how to do that so that it won't blow up. Now it has. There was a fellow who tried to do this down in Mexico, and he had one roll and he's dead. And then there was another guy who tried to do it in I think it was Bulgaria, and their factory burned down. So if you don't do it right, it's a very deadly thing. Now there are companies over in, say, like Istanbul, who say that they understand the family secret, and they do enough so that they don't die. Which, I mean, that's a pretty good litmus test right there, right? But they don't know enough to allow the energy in the cymbal to travel around and in and out the way it should. And so I'm happy with that. That, you know, first of all, they don't die, that's fine. And second of all, they can't make a cymbal that sounds the way it should. It doesn't open up and release and give you the tone that it does. So yeah, really, what we call 80-20, we just call that cast cymbals, because we melt it ourselves. We get the copper usually from Chile, because that's the best copper that you can find, and it has to be fire refined because it needs to have little things like silver and other little trace metals in there, because all this stuff works together to be the glue that holds everything tight. And then now tin can come from, we bought it from Canada, we bought it from the United States, we got it from Chile. Wherever our broker has it and it's a good price, that's usually where we buy it.
So I got a question and then a statement. The question is, do you hang out with Don Flamuero a bit? You've got a very similar sense of humor.
Is what?
Yeah. You've got a very similar sense of humor, I'm noticing.
Well, I like Dom. I like Dom. He kills me because he's so full of energy. He's just always going. And then when you see him, he gets to this point in the day when he just sort of goes, he's lost it. He's gone in another place. 10 minutes later, he's right back. Hey, how we doing, fellas? All right. Yeah, he's right at it.
I saw him at a couple clinics, and he was outstanding. He was just, you're right, very energetic, but great teacher. So the statement is, and you mentioned the B20s and that line. So a lot of people that play the club, so I use myself as an example, you're getting drinks spilled on them. You're getting, so you don't tend to go high-end line. But one of the things I will say about Sabian, and I've always said this, and I'm not just kissing butt here, Andy, because you're here, but even the lower-end cymbals still sound $1 million compared to some of the other low-end cymbals of other companies, and they're durable. They're very durable.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we left Z Companies, was because at that point, the mindset was, and I heard my grandfather say this, and it blew my mind, because it's just like, this is not what I expected. It has our name on it. It's good enough. Like, whoa, wait a minute, what? And that sort of permeated that area. And my dad was absolutely against that. And I was too. And so was my brother at that point. No, it's just, no. We're not just making a product. We're making an instrument. It's a cymbal. It's got energy in it. It's a living metal. The person who's making it is putting their energy into this thing. It's not just a widget. It's not something that gets formed on a machine and sent out. So yeah, we do work very hard to make sure that not only they sound great, but they're made well enough that they're going to last for a long time. And the cool thing, you're talking about things like you get drinks spilt on them, and if you ever have chicken grease on your hand, if you want to really make your cymbal go green, grab it. If you don't ever have chicken grease on your hand. But what happens is the tonal grooves, the part that we laid off, and you can see it on like AAs and HH. You got a tonal groove that's pretty deep, and on an AAX and HHX, the tonal groove, what some people call ridges, are smaller. And what happens is that it controls the sound coming out when they're smaller, and when it's bigger, you get much more of a forceful volume that comes out. As the cymbal gets older, those things start to tip down a little bit. The tops of them start to come down, and they start to get filled in. So what happens is you actually decrease the volume. So you're kind of controlling the sound. And some people absolutely just love their old cymbals because they got all this gook that's inside them, and that's the they're listening to, and they love that sound. And they loved the sound when they first bought the cymbal, but they've been playing it for like 5, 10, 15 years, and they've been listening to it slowly change, and this is what they bought and they still loved it, but this is what they're used to now. And so they're saying, can you remake that sound? Like, oh my God, how do you make a cymbal that's brand new that sounds like it's 15 years old?
Right.
So we can. I can't tell you how, but we can. and we do
stuff, Andy. I have another question for you. And again, I'm the bass player again. So when you talk about a hand-hammered cymbal,
yeah,
are each one of these cymbals handmade? They've got to be mass-produced to some degree. They have to be.
Well, when we're making, say, a hand-hammered cymbal, it goes into the oven and gets rolled, and it gets rolled with anywhere from, it could be, if it's a big one, 90 cymbals, anywhere up to 360, either depending on the size of the cymbal you're trying to make. And from there they'll be heated up again, and a cup will be put into them with a cupping machine. We'll let it cool, and then we put it in for tempering. And from that point, really, all the cymbals split, because AA and HH, AAX, HHX, and everything can be, at that point, can go either direction. But when we decide that we're going to hand hammer this specific cymbal, then it comes out and it gets, a hand hammered cymbal does not get pressed to get its general shape. It gets bumped just to keep the particles on the inside of the cymbal active, so that when you do hand hammer it, you don't have a cymbal that's starting to settle. So for the first week or so, you've got a cymbal that's still pretty active, and all the particles on the inside are moving all around, and they're lively. And when you hand hammer it, you're squishing the top and flattening the bottom, and what happens is you are tilting it and tilting it and tilting it, and the sound, when you hit the cymbal, the energy traveling from the edge, instead of coming through like it does on an AA cymbal, an almost uniform pattern. So it has a uniform kind of energy coming through. It has to work its way up and down through all these different patterns that are hammered in. Now, what a lot of people think is every part where it's compressed, that slows down the cymbal, but it doesn't. It's quite the opposite. Think of it as you're running down the beach and you're jogging, and you get to a part where there's tar and you can run faster, and then you're back in the sand again, right? So where it's not hammered, the energy is in the sand, and where it is hammered, it's like being on the tar. It zips by faster. So that's why a hand-hammered cymbal will have its own character, no matter how uniform we try to make it, and we never do. We try to make them so that they have the correct shape, they have the correct weight, the correct sound, form. All of that needs to be done correctly, but they're never, everyone is its own individual cymbal. Wow. Whereas an AA will be closer to being more of an individual, more of a consistent sound between each one, but it still has its points where it's going to vary, because we still do our lathing and edging and everything else. We still do that completely by hand. And the reason, when you've got a cymbal and it's made out of B20, it's an inconsistent metal. There's some spots where there might be just a little bit more tin, a little less. I mean, we're talking about, micro matters, but just enough so that as they're leading in and the lathe is going over and taking the tin oxide off the outside and putting in those tonal grooves, they can feel if it's getting a little bit harder, and so they can lean in just a little bit more, or they can feel a spot that's getting soft, so they just a little bit more. So what happens is, unlike the other company, where they have automatic lathing, where you have a perfectly consistent motion of the lathe machine, on an inconsistent cymbal, what you end up with is inconsistent. But when you have, in our case, two inconsistencies, the metal and the person lathing it can adjust their pressures, you end up with a much more consistent sound.
Love it.
Yeah. So yeah, a little backwards, but it's not a science, it's an art.
Well, and you know what? That's a great point, because you cleared something up for me, because there was a certain cymbal that I was looking at, which was an 18, and I didn't buy it. And then I went back 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks later, and it was the same cymbal, an 18, but it wasn't the same cymbal. Yeah. And it was like, it was totally different to me. And I like the sound of picking it up. So that's interesting. The other to say, and probably one of the first times that I went to the plant, this is a number of years ago, like any young moronic drummer. I was having a problem, so my cymbals were breaking across the and I don't know who your guy was, but he would have been the guy at the end of the line that was testing every cymbal, and he said, "You got to slice them."
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. So when I play now, I get a lot of people that say, "You're really abusing them," and I'm not. I actually slice them when I play. But that was such a helpful piece of information that, hey, I get to see some cool cymbals be made, and I get some great info that helped me save an awful lot of those cymbals that I'm using. So again,
Liberty DeVito, the guy who played with Billy Joel for so many years, a great guy, good friend of mine. I went to see him play many times, and his drum tech, Dave Hoffbauer, he was really good welder. And the reason why he was his tech and he was a good welder is because Liberty never broke his cymbals. I think in all the years that he's been playing with us, he broke one, and it was because it fell on stage. What he would break would be on the cymbal stand. The cymbal sits down over the peg. He'd break the pegs off of his cymbal stands at least twice during each concert, at least. So he's hitting so hard, he's coming across. He's never breaking the cymbal, but he's hitting with such ferocity that it's shaking the whole cymbal stand up and breaking the tip off.
I'm glad you brought his name up because I mean, I always liked him, and I didn't appreciate him until I saw that Hired Gun movie.
Oh yeah, which is on tonight.
Is it?
Yep.
Honest to God, I sat there and I watched that, and my first line was, "That's a dude. I'd buy him a beer and sit there and shut my mouth and just listen to him for hours." I mean, he just like this. I mean, and you watch him play, and he was doing that jam piece. Yeah. And the first drops are, like you forget he's such a great player, but just what a dude! Like it was just, just an amazing guy.
Great guy. Actually, he was he and Dom were good friends beforehand anyway, because they both were on Long Island. And when Dom came over, I think it was 1990, it was the same time Lib came over. And God, what a gas with those guys, just hanging out, listen to, of course, the Liberty stories. And I'm not going to say any of them here because I don't know the age of the audience, but wow. Wow. And a funny guy. God, he's funny. Liberty.
Yeah. And I mean, watching the document, and there were so many cool things about it. Kenny Aronoff was in it, and but Liberty DeVito was my favorite guy in that whole thing, and it was just the wisdom.
His book came out today. I think it's called Liberty, Billy, or Life and Billy Joel, or something along those lines. But it's Liberty hyphen Life and Billy Joel.
I'll have to look at that, because even when he told the story about being asked to leave the band, and I mean, plays all that time, and then he gets an impersonal email that basically says you're done, and you could tell he wasn't happy, but the way that he told the story was, you didn't, probably not happy, probably bitter, but didn't come across that way in the movie. It was cool.
At that point he had already gotten over the real anger, and he was at that point thinking, that's not the way Billy talked to me ever.
Yeah.
Who really did that?
Yeah.
And so he and Billy got together for a breakfast on Long Island a while ago and started talking about it, and found out that no, Billy wasn't the one. Billy was told that Liberty had said, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, and somebody else had said, you're getting rid of Liberty, or just said, Liberty's gone, actually, is what he said. Liberty's gone. And Billy was like, what the hell for? So they were both mad at each other because some guy in the middle ruined it.
Yeah. You know what? It's too bad, because I mean, I think Chuck Bergey's playing with him now, and he's a great drummer in his own right. But I mean, Liberty DeVito, man, just groove, cool.
You know what about him? He never really took a lesson, right? And so, and not that taking lessons is a bad thing, because it's an excellent thing. But if you have this incredible creative brain, and you can just bring that out on the drum kit. Think about Downeaster Alexa and how we just made that sound. You're on a boat. You can hear it, you can feel it. And all the stuff that he did on Turnstiles, you can hear all the difference, the way he puts a slight fill there and doesn't put it over here. It makes such an incredible difference. Yeah. Listening to drummers play, the creative side, and when they decide when they're going to put something in, when they're not going to put something in, or if they come up with an idea, like Woody, who plays with Bastille, they decided they were going to come up with a different way of presenting the rhythm. Oh my God, man, that sounds fantastic. How did you think of that? And he's like, well, I didn't have anything holding me in. I just decided I was going to stay outside the box. wow, when they do this, it's just, I love that kind of thing. Just the creativity, the fearlessness, the ability to just go ahead and do it.
And I have a question for you. So I understand you have artists that come right to your shop in Meductic. So if you want to name names, you can, but I mean, who have been some of your most creative people that have come in there? And I presume that you're able to, create a line of products that someone's endorsing and sell them, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, like we've had Dave Weckl up a couple of times. He's had 2 different lines that have come out through us. I mean, we had Neil Peart that came up with his, but his was really, he was looking for a sound that was an old one. So it wasn't that much of a stretch for us. Whereas someone like a Jeff Hamilton came up and he said, look, I want, this is weird. He said, I want to have this cymbal. It has to sound like this. It has to always sit this way. And I want it to feel like butter. Like, oh my God. Okay, well, at least he didn't say, can you make this cymbal sound more oaky, which I've had before as well. Please explain. I have no idea what you're talking about. But the one that really got us, that we did learn a lot from it, and it sold well amongst his followers, but after that, it just sort of died off, was Terry Bozzio. When Terry came up and he said that he wanted cymbals that he could go, and Jack DeJohnette did this first, but he didn't go nearly as far off the curve as Terry did. He wanted to be able to go from the drum set to the cymbals and back and have it just be a slight melodic difference, not a complete textural difference. So in other words, he didn't want it to splash and ride out. He wanted it to sound different, but it was still within the context of drums. So it was easy to just move back and forth. Jack was looking for the same thing, but he did it with the cymbal. Terry did it with the radia, which was, okay, so typically, like I was saying, we lathe the cymbals, and when they're spinning in a circle, and you start lathing in, and you're taking off the tin oxide, and what that does is it gives you the amplifiers, the tonal ridges, the tonal grooves, and the sound comes out from there. Terry said, what if we didn't do it in a circle? What if we went in and out from the edge? Oh my God. All right, let's give that a shot. And we did. And, we learned a lot about the way sound travels off of cymbals and how the grooves work and the depth of the grooves and the differences that happen because of that, because of what he asked us to do. Now, it didn't sound like a real cymbal in that it fit the context that he was asking for. So it wasn't the kind of cymbal you hit and you hear it crash. You hit it and it sounded like a metal drum. So yeah, we have lots of weird requests. No problem. Let's give it a shot. Because if we don't, even if it doesn't sell, we're going to learn something from it.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to the new endorsee who just walks in the vault and says, I'll take one of these and one of these.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you this, and I did every job that you could here except for lathing. I did every job that you could here. I was in the factory, in the melting room. I was working in a warehouse. I was a road rep for years. I worked down in South America as the sales rep for that area. Took over artist relations in Eastern United States. And I had a guy playing a hair band out of Long Island. And I really didn't like hair bands that much because they didn't care what they had. They just wanted free stuff. And if you're not going to respect the art that we're putting into this, why do I have to respect you? And, that was the attitude that I had. And, maybe respect them as a human being, but at the same time. So anyway, this guy said, he called me up on a Tuesday and he said, Andy, I need 2 sets of cymbals on Thursday. We're leaving on Friday. I'm leaving on Friday for a European tour. And I thought, oh, wow, somebody got sick and he's filling in because this doesn't just happen, right? So I said, oh man, so who are you filling in for? He said, what do you mean? And I said, well, whose throne are you going to be in? He goes, mine. It's our band. I said, oh, okay. So is there another band that fell out of a tour and you guys are taking over their spot? And he said, no, it's our tour. And I said, dude, how long have you known about this? And he said, well, it's been confirmed for 3 months. And I said, okay, so 3 months ago you knew about this. It's Tuesday. You want me to go pick 2 sets of cymbals for you and ship them down to you so they arrive by Thursday? And he said, yeah. And can you guys beep things out if I say it?
Sure.
Oh, yeah. No.
Okay. Then I said, Okay, fuck off. And I hung up. The day I decided I need to hire somebody with a more calm, attitude than I have. So I hired a guy for that.
It's funny because
I love Andy.
a question that I had that I will ask here in a second, but that to me is anonymous because Dave and I both grew up in that genre of music, and I mean, played the clubs, and I mean, it's like, okay, do I replace that broken cymbal or do I get beer and food? What do I do?
Well, look now. Look, I don't want to disparage all hair bands. I mean, guys like Bobby Rock and players like Carmine and there are people out there who really do care about what they're playing. But the ones that were coming up at that point, people who start a genre of music, people who start a new direction, they're creative people. They usually care about what they're doing, how they're doing it, the sound, and in this case, they also cared about their look. But the people who follow behind, when all they're doing, if they're not stretching the envelope, if they're not taking any risks, all they're doing is copying somebody else, then the integrity of what they're doing is much less, and they're calling it original, really. If they're calling it original and they're not stretching the envelope, then their integrity for me has dropped. And that's been backed up time and time again, especially by people who are just following along, that we really don't care. They just want free stuff. So we don't even work with those people anymore. When we have that type of person, if you're not somebody who's willing to take a risk, if you're not somebody who's playing the cymbals for the right reason, and if you're not a good person, then forget it. But no, you're not with us. I can't tell you how many times I had people come up to me at the NAMM show and say, "Yeah, man, I really like your stuff. It's cool." And I'd say to them, I've listened to you play. I love the way you play, but you know what? That cymbal over there is much more in tune for what you're looking for. And I'd send them over to like a Peisty or somebody like that because I don't want to deal with them. They were bringing nothing to us. So off you go.
Yeah, but Andy, to your point though, you said it. It's like each cymbal you make is like a little piece of art. It's a work of art. So I get it. I understand that. You're not going to waste your art. People aren't going to appreciate it. It makes sense.
The energy these people are putting into what they make, that love, that passion. You don't want to just have it out there and bash and people only using it because I got it for free. And what kind of endorsement is that anyway? I got it for free? No, sorry, you're out. Time to go. Unless you're playing it because you really like it, and this is something that you can stand up and say, then you shouldn't be there. Shouldn't even do it. Just go out. You made enough money on tour. Go buy some.
Well, and I sent you that picture of my old dusty rock ride, which I still play. It's I got that.
He loves that cymbal. He loves it.
Look, that's what I'm talking about. In love with that sound, right? Exactly the reason. That's the type of person that we would be looking for. Yep.
So when you have people that are coming in that are trying to do like a signature cymbal.
Oh yeah.
Have you had people that come in and either ask for accompaniment and bring accompaniment so they're playing along with a guitar player or a bass player or a horn player or whatever?
You know what? No, we've never had anybody bring other musicians along with them. They have tried stuff out and asked for like 3 to be sent home so that they could play with their friends at home.
Yeah.
But never actually had them come with them up here. No, that's an interesting concept. I don't want to pay for it.
Here, Sean, I love your idea. Fuck off.
The reason why I played a band keyboard player that has a pretty big sound, and we all wear earbuds. I was having a very hard hearing my hi-hats, and I went through a few different hats, and a set of 13 seems to be the ones that are the best. But I went through 14s and 15s, and I just kind of tried them at the store and put them on the hi-hat stand. It was like they were getting eaten up by the keyboard sound.
Yeah.
I used the 13. It's like, whoa, there it is. That's why I asked that question, because I was always just kind of wondering.
Well, yeah, people will take home a couple different pairs to try them out, and really that's a good reason why right there. Because you wouldn't think of a 13 to have that kind of cut, but because it's going to be a much higher pitch cymbal than a 15, it will cut so much more. But yeah, I would think too, well, you got the bigger one, it's going to have more volume. Not till you try it out.
Well, and you know what? And it was I don't know. I love me 13s, my friend. I mean, they just seem to do it for me, and I can get the stand a little closer when I'm playing, and you know.
Yep.
And but the other thing that this did was I typically went 16, 18 on the ride side, and because of the fact that the keyboard player again sits up to my right, I found a 16. I think it was an XS, and it cuts through all stuff. And I put an 18 where I used to put the 16, and it works great. So I mean, it's just all experimentation. But you know.
Yeah, I've got 13 hi-hats, 18, 18, 20, and then 22 ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you know, and I've I mean, I've always loved like the bigger ones, but for me as and I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, the rooms I'm playing are smaller, but I've seen to have scaled down. So my cymbal is where I might have had, you know, a 22-inch China. Now it's you know, it's a 16-inch China, and everything is smaller, but it's again, I've dabbled in a number of different cymbals, and it's not just because I'm doing it, but God, man, 35 playing freaking Sabian.
Well, you know, it happens that you know, cymbal size desires, what people want to hear, just keeps going like this, because if everybody's moving this direction, you move that way, then you want to step out and do something different, you do this, and then everybody starts to follow, and it just keeps going back and forth. Country music, like 3 years ago, I think if you didn't have a 24-inch ride, then you weren't going to be able to play. And now I'm seeing 20-inch rides for people playing on those. So yeah, and really it comes down to what sound works best for you, what sound best works for your band. Especially if you're going to be a hired gun, and you got a guy like Ben Caesar playing with Brad Paisley. Brad actually listens to the cymbals. When he switched to Sabian, Brad came back and said, "Those sound really good. Way to go, man. Those sound great. Thanks." He thanked him for it. And so, you know, he's listening to what you're doing as well. So everything has to mesh.
Well, and a lot of vocalists don't like the singer in my band. I don't like swashing. He always says that. He's a big Who fan. He loves the Keith Moon, the Alex Van Halen, you know, chaos of, you know, the big wash, but he doesn't like to hear it. And so the kid,
it gets in his way.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because with lead singer, you can't have that.
LSD, right? But I find live now. I'm going to put together a recording kit, but I find live those XS, for whatever reason, man, they, you know, again, they're not breaking the bank. If somebody pours a shot of Jagger on it, I'm not going to get too upset about it. And they crank.
Yeah, well, they're a cast cymbal as well, and it's just that they're made a little bit differently than both the AA and the HH and AX, HHX. They're made differently so that the processes that we put into them still bring out full range of sound, but just in a not quite with the same differences in character that you can find with an HH and such. And it's also, it's less processes, so it keeps the prices lower because you don't have more manpower going into it, more time, more effort. Yeah, but they're beautiful cymbal.
Oh, listen, somebody gave me one to try.
Yeah,
and I was, oh, this is interesting. And the other thing too I like about them, and again, it's just maybe it's an OCD thing. I like how shiny they are.
Okay.
You know, right? They just look really peppy on I use a black drum kit. They just look really nice and nice put together with a full set of drums.
Hey, you know what? Everybody has you know, their artistic voice and what they want to be and what they want to be perceived as. And it's not just in sound, it's also in the visual. So absolutely, you're right on there.
Yeah. And I had a question for you. So we're going to go back to the folks in New Brunswick again. So you mentioned that gentleman's name who started early on and took all the machinery apart. So is there a number of people who had that maritime work ethic, you used to say, that are still working at the plant and are still like?
So this year, okay, so Nord Hargrove, he retired 3 years ago at 46 years at the factory.
Wow.
And let's see. So Mark Love is amongst the group that's in the higher end. He's the youngest one there, and he's had 33 years. And we've got two guys who are pushing 46 years right now. I know, and thing is that these guys, they've done everything in the factory, to the point where you can say there's something wrong with this cymbal, and they can listen to it and they go, oh, you know what? We probably didn't do X correctly, and we'll need to fix that. So they take all the cymbals and fix them. So that they've been there that long. And what we're trying to do is bring along people who are younger, who can learn from these guys, right, and learn more than one job, learn 4, 5, 6 different jobs, so that when time comes for them to be, you know, in a leadership role, they'll know as much as these fellows do now. Yeah, it's fantastic to have people who know that kind of thing. I mean, it's Nort, the guy who retired, is the only person outside of the family and the people who are working in the melting room who has been into the melting room. So he knows the family process, and he knows every other part of it. And there's one other fella, I take that back. There is one other fellow who is almost to the same point where Nort was. And so when I have a discussion, like a little while ago, Dave Weckl said, something's not sounding right on my cymbals. What's wrong? And so we tore it all the way back. We just, deconstructed the whole cymbal all the way back to how much of the trace metals are going into each one of these cymbals. Is it correct? And so we have a little gun that will tell us what's inside the cymbal. And so Nort and this other guy, Louis, and we were all to the point of talking about adding more silver into the cymbal. Is that something that we do? And as we went along, we found out it was really stupid. We found out that one of the machines that we use on it, hey, it was wearing out. And so it wasn't compressing as far in as it had before. So I'm like, oh my God, why didn't we think of that? Instead of going to the hard part, right? Because we had all of this knowledge, we were, something deep and something that would be, it's so far down the line that no one would know. No, it's just this machine, need to have another shiv in it, now it's perfect. Oh, yeah.
So your man Nort retires. Is it like you guys walk him to the door and it's like the Men in Black thing where he's
No, you know what we did is Nort actually retired the year just before my mom passed away. And my mom was a member of our board of directors. I mean, it's a family business, so it's me, my sister, and at that point, my mom. When she passed away, Nort was already retiring, and Nort has been, the big brother in the family for so long, and just really, he's a family member. We put him on the board, so he still has, the secrecy pact that has to go along with all of it. So he's still in.
Smart business, Andy. Smart business, right there.
Well, you know what? And he knows everything. He knows everything. He knows the soul of the company. He knows what we're all about. He understands the living portion of the metal, but he also understands that there's an artist side and there's a business side, and there's so many different things that go into having a company that sells cymbals all around the world. But at the same time, you can never lose touch with that. It's a living metal, and this is what we are creating. So it's great to have him there.
I love this story, and I'm loving this. I'm digging this whole thing. Question for you. No, I don't want you to put you on the spot. Any idea how many cymbals you sold to date from Sabian?
Oh my God! You mean since 1981?
Yeah.
Well, Peter Stairs would have a word for it, but I don't know if the pile is the right word. But I know that we've had 2 guys on the lathes who have each lathed over 1 million cymbals apiece, and wow. That's 2 out of the 8, and that was back in 2013. So I would say, oh gosh, I don't know. You know what? I'm going to have to do the math, but I would say it's probably over about 15 million cymbals.
That's crazy. And
easy.
15 million cymbals that you've sold, but people don't realize too, the whole process, it goes through a process. And the end of the line, if I remember correctly, somebody tests them to make sure that they're up to Sabian standard. And if they're not.
Well, here's one of the things. We've got more than one person who can test a cymbal, whereas some of our competitors, they only have one person that can do that. And I don't know if it's because they didn't train them, or they just don't trust them, or if it's a marketing thing. It could be just that too. But in our instance, we're looking at it and saying, guys, if you can learn how to listen to a cymbal, and you can determine, you can get your muscles strong enough in your ears to be able to hear these sounds all the time, then let's train them how to do it. And we've got one guy who's really strong on paired cymbals, hand hammered and hand cymbals. Two other guys who are just really fantastic on kit combo cymbals. And we've got a bunch of people who can do the initial testing when it comes in. We got probably 6 people who can do that. What happens when a cymbal comes into the vault, into the inventory area? We test it, and it's either good, bad, or if it's right in the middle, we'll let it rest for a little while, because like I said, it's still active, and you got to let it settle down. And over a week, it'll settle down. That once the cymbals that are in the middle will either go, they're just off, or they're right off the tank, throw them out, cut them up, and start over again. We do that with all of the cymbals that don't make it. Cut them up, start over again, because we're taking the raw material and making our own casting. So all we have to do is melt it down again. And so teaching the fellas how to do that, it's not difficult, but you do have to have a talent to get to the point where you are the people who are testing them afterwards. After a week, hear them again and say, this one's excellent. There's only 3 people we got who are really strong at that.
Right on.
Andy, did you ever branch off and look into like doing hardware or actually drum kits themselves? I don't know. Maybe you have. I'm sorry, but you didn't know that.
We have called Gombops, and that's a Latin instrument company. And the reason why we got that was for a couple of reasons. One is, I love music, so the passion that goes into Latin music just fires me up. And so I love the instrument. I've got a lot of friends who play the instruments, congas, timbales, and bongos and stuff. And a friend of mine had a company that was a really good name out in California, but for whatever reason, his sales department decided that they weren't going to sell it. And, he had other fish to fry, so he didn't spend much time on that. And I said, look, Chris, if this thing's not going to work for you, I'll buy it from you, because I love that this Gombops it was by this guy named Bobadilla, and he made the absolute best, most authentic Cuban sounding congas that he could. I said, I love that it's a quality product. I love that it's all based on quality. It's based on tradition. It fits right in beautifully what we're doing. And so now we've got over in one of our smaller buildings, we got a guy who's building congas for us. And, he just said, I want to try it. So he's over there now. He's building congas. And we build bongos and all types of different things. But we've gone into that. We have accessories. We've got all types of things. We've got this thing called the Sabian Sound Kit, which is you have microphones that are, earring microphones, plus another and a bass drum one, and a little controller. And the sound is supposed to be set up so it's easier for a drummer to be able to equalize it the way that you want it to be. And you can either just equalize it and put it out from there into the front of hall, or you can have it go directly into your ears, or you can record to it, or all different types of things. So there are certain things that if drummers have a problem, or if they have something, issue that they need solved, or a need, we'll look in to see if we can do it. And there have been times when we've looked at it and said, that really is a need, but boy, we have no expertise in that, and we can't help you, but you go here, they might be able to do it for you. So, but yeah, we'll take a stab at many different things.
I have a need. How do you get a singer to stop pouring Jagger on your cymbals? Can you figure that one out for me?
AA. Doesn't he know what Jagger does to you?
Oh, I know. It's a magical little drink, right? So you mentioned Mark Love, because when we made connection, I chatted briefly with Mark, and he and I were actually talking about one of your endorsees that we're gonna have on. I think it's the 30th of July. I can't say who it is. It's big reveal. But he was telling me, and we weren't talking specifically about that person, but he was just kind of telling me the process of what he goes through, or what happens with him when he's working with some of these artists to come up with their sounds. And the thing that fascinated me is it's not just a kind of a, I can tell he's very passionate about it.
Oh, yeah.
From asking, questions beforehand, spending time with the person. I'm guessing he probably looks at his style, what he currently is using, different sorts of things like that. Is that a fair statement? That's all part of the R&D process?
Absolutely. And Mark is the person who, when Nort retired, Mark was already fulfilling the role that Nort had. which was research and development and quality control. Mark is definitely, he's one of those people who fits into that really strong ingenuity and fearlessness, and he's got a creativity that just, you can talk to him about the sound that you're looking for, and he's putting together the cymbal in his mind. And so when you finish just describing the sound you're looking for, he's already figured out mostly how to make it. And yeah, he's always looking for things like context. Like we have guys like Jeff Hamilton will send stuff up and say, I want this cymbal to fit in with this playing that I'm doing with Diana Krall. Can you do that? So he'll send up, you know, the recordings of what he's doing with. And a person like Chris Lamb, who plays with the New York Phil, he'll say, okay, I'm looking for Chai 7. Okay, Tchaikovsky 7. So we'll listen to that. That's the context in which he's looking for the cymbal. And, you know, so that kind of thing is always presented. I can't say always presented to Mark, but Mark always wants to have that type of thing, because now he may have an idea of what he's looking for, of what he thinks you're looking for. But if he can hear and understand that context, it completely clarifies the whole thing for him. And actually, he's one of the what I think is one of our more brilliant people, and he fits our culture so well. And one of the reasons is because we want to listen to a drummer. What are you looking for? We will have no preconceived notion as to what we think you should sound like. It's what do you want to sound like? And Mark, because he was never a drummer, doesn't sit there and say to himself, no, I wouldn't play that. That never enters his mind. What enters his mind is, you're looking for this sound, I can make it, this is how I can. What's the context? I hear the context, now I understand what I need to do. Yep, you got it. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him for about 10 minutes, and it was really funny because I asked you, and you mentioned the Chai 7 and what have you. The question I asked him, I won't say what it is, but he goes, did you try loosening the wing? It's like, kid you not.
So they were choking, huh?
Yeah, basically it was a typical dumb drummer question. But my point with Marcus is that I really and he mentioned a couple of folks that he had worked with, and I got the pathway. And it's interesting to me that you say that he wasn't a player, because I think maybe in some ways that's better.
I do too. I mean, there's sides to each one. A lot of the other people who are in the vault are drummers, so that we all have that sensibility or sensitivity of drumming. You know, we know the passion of what we're doing. Mark has that same passion, not for the drum kit, just for the cymbal. So for him, it's not so much as to what would I want to hear, but it's what can I make that is going to make you have the voice that you want. And geez, man, it's just awesome.
Yeah. It was for me, it was enlightening, because I'm not used to, I mean, typically here, what happens here, I mean, I go to Long and McQuaid, I go in, and the guys there are very helpful, but there's a certain sound that I'm looking for, because I know what I'm dealing with in my musical setting. Yeah. So you get to take the time to actually sit down and go, well, this does this and this does that. You just kind of, so, you know, a guy like the next time I'm in Fredericton, I'm going to go productive. I'm going to buy Mark a coffee. I'm going to shut my mouth and listen to him for 20 minutes. Give him a heads up. Maybe he takes a vacation that day, but.
Well, when Mark takes a vacation, he actually goes away. But you know, thinking about that, there's we were trying to figure out ways to help people out during the COVID lockdown. How are you going to pick cymbals out? And you can't go to a store and play them, right? And you can order them online, but you get what you get, and so, which is okay. But it's if you're looking for a specific sound, it's not going to fit the bill. So we were trying to figure out how we could help drummers get what they needed, and we came up with this idea. It's called Sabian Soundcheck, where you call us up and say, I'm looking for some crashes. I want something really kind of funky, sizzly. This is the kind of music we're playing. And Mark will say, okay, and he'll pick out 4 cymbals, and he'll send them to your house. You try them out, and you decide if you want to keep one or if you want to keep 4, or you know, they just didn't fit. You didn't like them. You send them back. But it's trying to bring the experience of being at a retailer to home during lockdown, but at the same time improve it, because now you're on your kit. So it's not just that you're hitting a cymbal in a room. You're actually
context. Yeah.
That
makes sense.
And I mean,
I kind of like your forward thinking, Andy.
I got a story for you. I was doing retail in Worcester, Massachusetts, and this guy comes in and he's checking out cymbals and he's hitting them. And he goes, yeah, I think probably these two. I'll send my guys in tomorrow. And I'm thinking he's going to send in his roadie, and his roadie's going to pay for him and pick him up, and off he goes. No, the next day in comes the bass player and the singer. And they go, yeah, we're with Tony. Like, oh, good, yeah, how you doing? You guys use roadie? No, I'm the singer. Oh, I'm the bass player. All right, that's interesting. The bass player comes down and puts his ear right next to the cymbal. And the singer leans over the cymbal, and this is how they picked them out. Leans over the cymbal and goes, oh! And that's how they were picking out the cymbals. And I said, gentlemen, you really should be playing these Zildjians over here, and move them right over to oh. I got something else for you. Try this one.
There better ever be a drummer joke come from a singer or a bass player again after that story. I swear to God. Oh my God, that's hilarious. So you guys are probably like, and you just mentioned it. It's like we rehearsed this ahead of time, but I mean, you've had to kind of shift gears a little bit to get through all this stuff. But are the still coming from your artists for things and what have you?
Well, actually, not so much right now. Mostly because, of course, they're not touring and they can't. So, and so I was talking to this friend of mine, Jim, earlier this week. He said, "Boy, you know that those so complex sound fabulous. I mean, really, I want to try some out." And I said, "Jim, I got this text message from you in January that says I have the best cymbals that I've ever had right now. So I'm not going to mess up your kit. You should keep what you got for the." And he was like, "Oh, you bastard." And I said, "Bro, we can't send anything out really right now because we're filling orders, and for the most part, the artists aren't looking for anything. They've all heard the new stuff, and when time opens up and it gets easier for us, they'll get what they need."
Right on.
And listen, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Like I think we could probably go on another 2 hours. So I'm fascinated by the whole thing, like the whole story. Just I can see your pride right now and beam and everything you guys do there, and that's awesome. I mean, from the name brand himself. So anyhow, as a bass player, just a lowly old bass player, I'm super impressed to hear your story. And thanks so much for sharing with us.
Oh yeah, and I didn't do any bass player jokes.
There is no fucking bass player jokes.
There's all kinds. And I just want to say, Andy, thanks for doing this. And next time I'm in Fredericton, I am going to go to the plant. And the other thing is, give your buddy Liberty DeVito a heads up that if he starts getting some emails from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, they're from this guy. Because I swear to God, I gotta get him on the show. He's such a dude.
It'd be great.
Well, and all jokes. Pardon me?
He's fun. He's funny. And he always thought that, I can't do a clinic. I can't talk to the public. I don't know what I'm doing. And we just said, what's your creative process? And all of a sudden, he had like 3 clinics worth of information. Yeah. But yeah, you'll have a good time with Liberty.
He could just sit there and talk and not hit a single friggin' drum.
Yep.
So anyway, my friend, thanks so much for doing this.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Sabian all the way, girls.
Absolutely. We are fans. We are big fans.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
And you take care of her.
All right.
Yeah.
See y'all.
All right. Peace out.